Hey everyone, welcome back to another Mark and Mark. Welcome back to the office. Still in lockdown, still looking at the book of Mark, and here we are. We're going to jump into chapter 3, starting at verse 20, and look at this next section from Mark. And I guess in this part of the book, the verse that probably jumps out is verse 29. Whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. Now, what does that even mean? There's just so much to talk about in this passage from verse 20 to verse 29, and it really is a unit, but we're going to split it up and we'll do some of the passage this time, and then we'll talk more about it next time. And next time, we'll jump into this verses 28 to 30, and talk more about it. We're not going to skip over them. I promise we'll be back. But for now, let's start in verse 20. Then he, that's Jesus, went home. This is back to Capernaum. And we're told the crowd gathered again so that they were not even able to eat. This is, again, classic Jesus at this point. Wherever he goes, he is this celebrity star attraction. Then we're told, verse 21, when his family heard this, they set out to restrain him because they said he's out of his mind. This is Jesus' family. You can't please all the people all the time. And I guess Jesus has been in conflict with the Pharisees and with the religious leaders. But here we see even Jesus' own family has come for him. They think he's lost his mind. They think the wheel is turning, but the hamster's dead. And so they've come to restrain him because they think he's lost his mind. And then here in verse 22, the story changes. And now we're talking about the scribes, no longer Jesus' family. It's a total change of topic. And what we see here is this is a classic Mark thing that we're going to see over and over again is he'll start one story and then he'll inject another story right in the middle of that first one. And then after this injected middle story, he's going to come back to that first story and finish it off. It's kind of like a sandwich where you got the bread and then the meat. I think of it more like a burrito. You've got this, this center bit here, and then this story at the start about Jesus and his family. And then after this, in verse 31, Mark's going to come back and finish this family story again. And the link, the way that it works is that the two events interpret each other. And the link is that Jesus' family thinks he's crazy, and the teachers of the law, the scribes, they think he's demon possessed. So we see here that they came down from Jerusalem and said he has Beelzebul in him. Now, this Beelzebul, this is a strange word. You might have heard of it before. Beelzebul. Maybe you've heard Beelzebub. We're pretty sure it's Beelzebul or Baal-zebul. The word Baal is the Ugaritic word for Lord. And then Zebul is the word for house. It's like this is the Lord of the house. And what we think happened was that the Israelites made fun of Baal, and instead of him being the Lord of house, the Lord of the heavens, they changed his name to Beelzebub, which means dung or, flies, because that's where flies live. So they changed his name. They're like, oh, you think you're Lord of the house, do you? Well, we think you're Lord of the outhouse. We think you're Lord of the dung, Lord of the flies, which I think is quite clever. I'm like, man, high five, ancient Israel. You can see this kind of thing in 2 Kings chapter 1, verse 2. We don't really know how the title Beelzebul or Baalzebul ended up being used for Satan, but you can see it pretty plain here in the text. Verse 22 here, you've got Beelzebul, he drives out demons by the ruler of demons, and then how can Satan drive out Satan? So it's pretty clear that Beelzebul is the ruler of demons, is Satan. So what's happening here? This seems like a strange idea that Jesus is driving out demons by the power of demons, that he's driving out Satan by the power of Satan. And Jesus' response in verses 23 to 26, his response is basically, that is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. He says, how can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. The idea is, if a football team kicks goals against itself, then that football team is going to lose. If the Australian Army goes to war against the Australian Army, then the Australian Army is going to lose. No one does this. Jesus is like, think about it for just 5 seconds. So the best idea you have, you scribes, is that Satan is going to war against Satan. Is that really what you're going to go with? That's the best you've got. These opponents are so set on being against Jesus that they'll come up with any insane idea. And the best one they've got is that Jesus is a messenger of Satan who is at war against Satan. Jesus then, in verse 27, turns to explain what's actually happening. He says, no one can enter a strong man's house, that's Satan, and rob his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man. Then he can rob his house. That is, you need to be stronger than the strong man. And Jesus says, that's him. He's the strong man. He's stronger than the strong man. And he's come to tie him up. This is the way that Satan loses. Jesus is stronger. He comes, ties him up, and then he's going to rob his house. Jesus is breaking and entering into Satan's house and stealing his stuff. He's stronger than the strong man. And then verses 28 to 30, we said we'll come back to next time. And then we come to verses 31 to the end, where we get the other side of the sandwich, the other side of the burrito. Now we're back with Jesus' family. His mother and his brothers came, and they're standing outside. And they sent word to him, and they called out to him to come out. And so the crowd was sitting around Jesus. Remember, this is inside the house. His family are outside. Jesus is inside. And they say, look, your family's here. They're asking for you. And then Jesus replies and says, who is my mother and my brothers? Now, when Jesus asks a question, here's a little pro tip. When Jesus asks a question, it's not because he doesn't know the answer. Jesus knows who his mother and brothers are, but he's making a point. He then looks around at those who were sitting in a circle around him and says, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother. And so what is God's will? Well, it's to see Jesus for who he really is. It's to listen to him, and it's to trust him. That's God's will. And people who do that, well, Jesus says, they're the ones who are part of my family. Now, there's one more quick thing to see here. This is going to be a big deal in Mark, and he's bringing it out here. This outside, they're outside. The mothers and brother and sisters, they're outside, and Jesus is inside. We now have this kind of outsiders, insiders thing going on. But the outsiders are not who you would necessarily think. The outsiders are surprising. The outsiders are the religious leaders, the scribes, the Pharisees, Jesus' family. And then you have the insiders. And the insiders have been surprising too. The insiders are tax collectors, sinners, lepers. You know, insiders are now outsiders, and those who you would think would be outsiders are now insiders. And so Jesus is the stronger man. He's stealing Satan's possessions, and outsiders are supposed to become insiders. People far from God are supposed to become close to God. That's why Jesus came. We'll see you next time.